Hey everyone, it's Chad Ostrowski here from the Teach Better team with the one, the only, the amazing Dave Schmidow, and it is time for our, I almost said Mastery Chat recap. It's our Mastermind Rewind coming right up. Hello, what is up? It is time for the Mastermind Rewind. Mr. Schmidow, how are you this morning, sir?
Life is good, man. I know I say this every Wednesday, but I'm on a high. Wednesday mornings are just, I'm just filled with adrenaline from the day that was. It's that runner's high, but it's the mastermind high, I guess. It's when you finish it and you're just like, whoa, my mind is so stimulated. Who needs coffee? Well, I always need coffee, but I need less coffee on Wednesdays. So I'm doing great.
I love it, man. I love it. I think you're on to something with that. If I'm being completely honest, like knowing you're not alone, especially right now, knowing you're not alone and you're not the only one feeling or going through these things, which so many administrators and educational leaders are. They just feel like, and especially if you look at that, and we have a variety of administrative leaders and educational leaders in these groups. But if you think about like the building level principal right now, you're getting it from every single direction. You're not only getting it from the central office and the admin office, but you're getting it from the staff, and you're trying to kind of shield and just make it all work. So like, regardless of where you are, you're going through a lot, and it's really easy to feel alone. So I feel like this mastermind, and it's been growing. I see the numbers. It's been just exponentially growing, more breakout rooms constantly. And it's become this place where it's like, it's a safe space. Mm-hmm. It's an open space where administrators can get what they need. And whether it's their first time showing up or they're a seasoned mastermind veteran, right?
It's that perfect blend of safe space, yet we don't have a secret handshake. I mean, this isn't a place where it's like only the few can join us. No, this is open to anybody and everybody. You know, I know there's a lot of mastermind groups out there for business and entrepreneurship and leadership and the whole 9 yards where people can come and grow. But those tend to be these select groups where sometimes you have to apply, you have to pay. This is open to anybody and everybody that considers themselves a leader. And yet once you join, it is that safe place where you can say what you need to say and it's not going to get back. This is a place to vent. It's a place to reach out and just ask for help and support. And what happens there stays there, which is the amazing thing about this. And yesterday, you mentioned it's growing. Yesterday is a prime example. We had more than 35 people come join our mastermind group. And this represented 18 states and 3 countries. And I mean, just think about that, to have leaders from 18 different states sitting in one place. Nobody is the expert. Everybody just brainstorming and hashing out solutions to the problems that we all present and that we all have. So many times when I was a building principal, you talk about that being on an island, I felt like I was all alone. You're right. You get, I don't want to say attacked, but people come to you from all angles wanting you to have all the answers. And sometimes you have to pretend like you have them. Sometimes you just flat out don't. And when you don't, you just feel so alone and so isolated. You don't know who to go to and ask for support and help and guidance because you're supposed to be the person with the answers. So this mastermind group allows us to just be real, vulnerable, transparent, and say, get me off of this island. Let me see life. Don't make me just talk to my Wilson volleyball all the time. Let me talk to a real person. You know, I don't have to be a castaway anymore. And I think that's what's happening. People are realizing that there's this community where they can lean in, see people in real time, talk to people face to face, and have real conversations. And it is powerful. It is absolutely powerful.
Yeah. I love it, man. And I love that you said that the variety of people and places things are coming from, right? So 18 states, 3 separate countries. I truly view our mastermind every week as the pulse of education. Because I think we're literally hearing from the horse's mouth in all these different states, from in the trenches, from doing the work, the problems and the issues that these people are having. I think we can use these conversations to really identify what is going on in education in this moment, this week, this day.
Sure.
And to be honest, it's 2020. So that's changing literally by the minute, literally by the hour. I mean, I know I had several conversations this week about schools going back to full remote, or teachers not being able to come to the buildings anymore because of state mandates and things like that. And literally these things are changing moment to moment, hour to hour. And so I view this, and I view this as the pulse of education. It's our way to kind of check the pulse and go, what is happening right now? Because we know what's generally happening in education, right? Pedagogically, instructionally, we know that remote learning is a thing now. We know all of these things are happening, but so many little day-to-day changes are occurring that this weekly meeting is such a great tool, I think, whether it's these recaps that people listen to or whether they actually participate, is to get into the pulse. So I guess my question to you is, what are you feeling is the pulse right now? What are those concerns? What are those topics that people are bringing up? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how both of the meetings went yesterday.
Yeah. So for people that have heard me share before, you've heard me use the tagline that if you get people to weigh in, you don't have to try to get them to buy in. And I think I'm going to just Teach Better, for example. That's one of the reasons this mastermind group, I think, is so successful and actually helps the Teach Better team in a lot of ways. Like you said, it's a way for the Teach Better team just to listen in and to get people to weigh in on what is going on in schools and education. The Teach Better team doesn't have a catalog and says, pick your poison. This is what we do. What the Teach Better team does is they offer support for what is needed. And it's important for us to listen to what's needed. Just like administrators have to listen to their staff. They don't need to come up with their school improvement plans in July and say, we're going full steam ahead, regardless of your needs, regardless of what the world does, regardless of pandemics, regardless of whatever, we're going full steam ahead. We have to listen to our stakeholders and adjust as needed. And yesterday, we had, like I said, 35 plus leaders sit around in a couple of different meetings, a total of 4 different breakout rooms, just having conversations about what is happening in their worlds and in their environments and the things that they're needing support in. And quite often we talk about the fact that there are these themes that develop and we start to hear the same things in every breakout room and every week. And that was partially true yesterday, but we had a couple of divergent conversations, which were powerful. In the evening group, which is this amazing group of people that truly spans the globe in the evenings. We had 10 leaders sit around and we just talked very real about system with a big S or organization with a big O. All school systems, all organizations right now, what are we going to do to tackle the teacher shortage and now the administrator shortage? We had a leader from Canada tell us that in his district right now, they are short 19 building administrators. Right now.
Wow.
And they're doing shuffling and they're trying to rearrange things. And he has to groom new leaders. In that same meeting that we have somebody that's going through their educational leadership degree program right now and trying to weigh what kind of leader do I want to be? What designation should I seek out? What position should I seek out? And then how do I navigate that system as we go? So we had those two worlds converging and having a great, powerful conversation. Then in the morning, with multiple breakout rooms, you're going to geek out on this, Chad. So be ready to start preaching. One of the breakout rooms that I jumped into, I'll tell you flat out, it was very hard to pull myself out of. I went in and I just kind of just dropped little nuggets and pulled out because I didn't want to just preach. But the question was grading. And they were asking about zeros. And this administrator had some statistics about the number of grades that were possible. And this huge percentage of the grades that were in their grading portal that represented zeros. And the question was twofold. One, how do we get kids to start doing the work? But 2, why are we giving zeros and how are kids going to redeem themselves and recover? And how does that mathematically work? And how do we assess progress? And I mean, it was just, I was like, oh, this is what I want to talk about. And now we've got a couple of meetings scheduled this afternoon for some one-on-one conversations to follow up because, again, that's the beauty of this the mastermind group is it's not just Tuesdays. We take the Tuesdays and we say the power is from Tuesday to Tuesday. So I'm spending some time this afternoon having follow-up conversations with people to talk about the logistics in their individual situation. So
absolutely. I was actually running a grid method training yesterday, and the same conversation came up about, things like zeros, things about grading. And I got to be honest, to me, it's really simple. If your grades are punishing students, you're doing it wrong.
Boom.
Like, if your grades are doing anything besides support and report the understanding the students currently have, based on something other than whether they did something or not, right? I think that to me is the crux of every grading issue in this country right now. Is it's so focused on the task completion as opposed to the knowledge or the mastery that exists, right? So like teachers are equating, did you do the homework? Did you do the worksheet with you? Do you know the information? When those two things are not mutually, two things are not mutually exclusive from one another. A student can know something without doing the worksheet. And maybe that's why they're not engaging in that task, even if they know the information. And right now we need to be creating pathways to success. Like that's sort of how I see sort of feedback and grading, right? And if we look at this archaic, broken model of the grading that has existed in the past, it's very, did you do your homework from 3 weeks ago? Did you bring tissue boxes in at the beginning of the year? Like the idea of things like bonus points and everything else. We have inflated, deformed, and broken our grading system for the last 120 years. And I'm pretty sure you'd agree with me on that statement. We have literally made it a social construct, right? So the purpose of what a grade is no longer what it's supposed to be. The grades have become like this social construct that means you're a good kid, or you follow directions, or you work hard, or you color in the lines and do neat work, when none of those things should ever actually go into what a grade is or what that feedback is focused on, because we have to focus on mastery. And now, especially, you told me I was going to geek out.
I knew I was just going to drop that and sit back.
So for me right now, this is an opportunity to go to that student with 10 overdue assignments or 10 assignments they haven't turned in and go, what do you still not know? And how can we get you there? Let's have that conversation, because when you break instruction and assessment and grading down into what do you know, what don't you know, and how do we bridge that gap, all three of those things are taken into account. And the only question you have as the teacher is, how do we bridge the gap? Not how do you do 10 assignments that might be redundant or arbitrary or not even important, right? I had a teacher yesterday tell me, well, I have this one assignment that's not really important, but they do it. And I go, then why are they doing it? Like, why? Like, if you're admitting to me that this is not a worthwhile assignment for them to do in this conversation, why should they have to do that assignment? Why should there be any grade associated with this assignment? And why are you wasting their time with it in the middle of a pandemic and remote learning when education is crazy right now? So I do think that's very topical right now, because this is an opportunity, if we view it the right way, to change some of these thoughts.
You are spot on. And I feel like you and I, we could geek out on this for 2 hours, and maybe we can, maybe we should, but let's talk a little bit more about
Jeff was talking about a 24-hour live stream. That could be
start it now.
It could just be you and me.
Done, man. We can bring Caitlin into the conversation too, because Caitlin Giordano always wants to talk grading as well. But
she does some really amazing, innovative things, holistic type grading practices that are just fantastic. Yeah.
So this whole idea of grading. Again, we can preach this, but just a couple of nuggets for people to ponder and consider. I am a firm believer that teachers are out there doing the best they can with the knowledge they have, always trying to follow rules. As I told this administrator yesterday, I asked point blank, do you see a correlation between the amount of assignments that kids are doing and attendance? And she said, no, kids are showing up for class. They're just not doing the work. And I said, so why are they showing up for class? And the answer is because they've learned to play the game. Because as schools and as systems, we have put so much emphasis on simple attendance. You simply be here because we know that that's where our funding comes from. And we need to have kids at least show up. And whatever we've done to say this is the most important thing, show up so I can make sure you're here. Kids have heard that that's the most important thing. So they show up, they take attendance so we can get their $7,000 or $8,000 for their butt being in a seat, and we're good. And then we look at the student and say, but if you're not going to do the work, if you're not going to complete it, if you're not going to show me evidence of learning, that's on you. I've done my part. I took attendance. The rest of it's on you, student. That's hogwash. And I'll take it a whole nother level. This administrator yesterday was asking about zeros and why are so many grade zeros. And I'm going to say something that I'm not sure where you stand on this, Chad. I'm not really sure where a whole lot of other people stand on this. But I am actually not opposed to zeros in a grade book. I'm not. I'm opposed to zeros on a 100-point scale and how it equates to kids mathematically. But for example, let's say that I am accused of a crime and I go to jail and I ask the lawyer, I ask the judge, I ask the police, whoever's indicting me of this crime, what evidence do you have that I committed this crime? And they say nothing. I want them to go to the judge and say, we have zero evidence that Schmitto did this. Zero evidence is zero evidence. If you have zero evidence that a kid has learned something, then a zero represents evidence of learning. But if you have any evidence that a kid knows something, you better have some evidence. You better have something that shows the kid knows something. And that's what grades are. Grade is shorthand for the evidence that you have collected on student mastery, on student learning, student progression. So if there's any way for you to have evidence, a zero better not be there. A zero represents zero, nothing, nada, zilch of evidence. Not compliance, not that they jump through your hoops, but it's the evidence that you've collected of learning, period. So go ahead.
So I actually, so I don't disagree with you. However, I'm going to just kind of add to your statement here.
Yep.
So I don't disagree that zeros have a place unless they are inaccurately deflating the total understanding that a student has, right?
Yep.
So I think that the reason that the whole idea of getting rid of zeros exists is to provide a scaffolded handicap for teachers to make their grading scales more accurate to student understanding. Because the truth is, when teachers are giving those zeros on a random homework assignment or a formative assessment, those are tanking the mathematical grade of the student and inequitably deflating the measurement of that student's understanding, which is now making the grade useless. It's now not an accurate representation of what the student knows. However, if we take a smaller scale, like a 3-point scale, and now have the same idea, now on a 3-point scale, that zero is not going to have as much detrimental effect mathematically because it's not out of 100 points, it's out of 3 points.
Yes.
So for me, it's not about whether a zero exists or not, right? Especially if no evidence, no effort, no attempt has been made to demonstrate understanding of a topic, standard, or target, okay, or objective. So like, to me, that sure, they have zero understanding as long as the grade actually reflects the student's understanding. So a lot of times when zeros are given, it's being given on a task, not to describe the level of understanding of an objective or a standard. And I think that is actually why the idea of zeros going away is important, because that's the only way you scale the idea and sort of handicap. You're providing a handicap. You're providing a scaffolded approach to making grades more accurate by removing this poor practice. Even if
it is.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it is a step in the right direction. So I'll put that out there. It is definitely a step that leads to more conversations. And you and I are huge believers in the progression of learning and mastery concept and scaffolded instruction. And I think that oftentimes saying we're going to eliminate zeros is that first step for teachers to gain their own progression of learning towards equitable and evidence-based grading and mastery-based grading. It is definitely that step. As long as people don't think that simply eliminating a zero is the answer and it makes your grading more accurate, it is a step. Because as long as you are still continuing to grade using percentages, for example, or points, we're still missing part of the equation. For example, you give a 10-question quiz to your students this week based off of the some sort of standard dealing with fractions. Say you're a math teacher and your students have a quiz that you give them on Friday, and a kid gets an 8 out of 10. In most math, in most grade books, that's an 80%. Now, my question to you is, if they got the first 8 of those right, and you had given them a quiz that only had 8 points on it, would they have gotten 100%? Would they have an A? Possibly. So what is different about those last 2 questions that they might have missed? Or if it was the first 2 questions, what was different? If it was questions 4 and 6, what is different? How much is enough for them to be able to demonstrate mastery? Is it 2 in a row, 3 in a row, 4 in a row, 5 in a row, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10? As long as we're still using these arbitrary, contrived mathematical equations to determine how many a kid has to be able to get to determine mastery, we're missing the mark a little bit. So
100%.
yeah, taking that 0 out of it helps us a little bit. But now it leads to the next question of what is mastery? How does a percentage work? What's the frequency? What's the recency? What's the relevancy? All of those other parts of the conversation that leads to more. And that's what gets me fired up when we're like, oh, the gateway has been opened. Pandora's box is open.
Right.
Now we can play and have the conversation.
The conversation can start at that point, right?
Yes.
And I tell teachers all the time, you realize if you switch to a standards-based 3 or 4 point scale, which also has its arguments, right? Some people say a 3-point scale means the highest grade you can get is a 3-point, which means proficiency, which means meeting the standard. Other scales go, it's a 4-point scale, so you can go beyond meeting the standard and exceed mastery, right? Then there's this whole other argument of, does mastery have levels, or is it binary? You either have it or you don't, right? So there's still other arguments to be had. But let's let's leave those arguments on the shelf for a second and just say that if we, instead of putting tasks, put learning outcomes in our grade book, we have fundamentally changed the conversation. When we measure outcomes and mastery of outcomes or targets or standards, the idea of like the 100-point scale makes no sense, and it becomes useless because now we are just using the grading scale to identify students' current level of mastery on individual skills or content outcomes. Yes. So when that exists, the whole argument about whether zeros exist isn't necessary anymore. The only reason that the whole 0 thing exists in the first place is to try to put a Band-Aid on this broken, gaping wound that is our current grading system that is 100 years old. So to me, like, the argument's almost moot because it's only trying to progress the conversation to get to this other point. To your credit, you just kind of, I think, nailed hit the nail on the head in terms of the 0 thing is just a conversation starter to get teachers talking and having the right conversations to transform feedback and grading so that you don't have to worry about the plethora of zeros, right?
That's it.
Because once that happens, it's no longer a conversation, right? Like it's no longer,
absolutely.
No longer an issue.
And you know, that's the bottom line is grading. You mentioned feedback. A grade is simply feedback that has been translated. So what we're doing is we're taking ideas that are basically synapses that have formed and neurons bouncing around in somebody's brain, internal knowledge that students have then produced on an external tool or an assessment, a quiz, an assignment that we have then placed a value upon, provided feedback on. Then sometimes we take that and we turn that into a percentage. Then we take that percentage and we turn it into a letter grade. And that single letter grade, a student is supposed to look at and say, oh, I understand all the feedback that you were giving me for my external demonstration of my internal knowledge. And we wonder why oftentimes there's a lack of understanding, why that grade doesn't necessarily result in quality feedback and improvements. Our goal as teachers is to make our feedback as explicit as possible, to eliminate subjectivity in translation. And in schools, I'm going to be honest with you, oftentimes schools, they take their feedback, they turn it into a percentage, they turn it into a letter grade, and then they turn around and they translate that into a 4-point scale themselves with a GPA. They take letter grades and then they turn it into a 4-point scale already, and then they start arguing, we can't do that. Well, you just did it. If you have a kid that's a 3.89 GPA, you've just told me where that kid is on a 4-point scale already. So stop with the we can't do that argument because you do it yourself. So
you've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
Oh man. So many.
So yeah, that was Mastermind yesterday.
Yeah. No, these are important conversations though, because teachers are thinking about this. But it also not enrages me, maybe a little bit. When teachers are like, here's my biggest fundamental problem with grading is it's always viewed as an autopsy as opposed to a current level of understanding.
Yep.
Like the idea that once a grade's put down, it cannot change is so misaligned with how learning actually happens in anyone. It just never has made sense to me. Like the idea that Dave Schmidt today knows this at a 70%, which means for the rest of the school year, no matter what else he learns, he will only ever know this at a 70%, is absolutely ludicrous to me. And it doesn't actually make any sense. So I think one of the other fundamental shifts that needs to occur in grading is we need to start looking at it almost, I view it as like a rain gauge or measuring snow outside. You're going to put the measuring stick out there. Some days the snow is going to go up, some days it's going to go down, but you're going to just keep measuring to see how it's fluctuating and how it's changing. And to me, those grades should also be fluctuating and changing based on the current level of understanding that the student is showing, or the current level of mastery or proficiency or competency that the student is showing on that given indicator or skill.
Perfect.
And I really think it's that elasticity that's missing from a lot of grading practices.
Mm-hmm. Here's a bad analogy for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's because I'm going to talk about the Detroit Lions, which nobody cares about, but I'm going to.
Thanksgiving's coming up. Thanksgiving's coming.
We'll all have to watch it next week. Yeah, but I'm a Detroit Lions fan living in Michigan. This past weekend, the Detroit Lions won on a last-second field goal. So the Detroit Lions field goal kicker, his name is Matt Prater, one of the greatest of all time, honestly. But this season, he's been struggling. This season, he is a 70%, he's a 70% field goal kicker. He's made, on average, 70% of his kicks. Last week, he made his first 3 field goals. With 3 seconds left on the clock, the coach runs him out on the field to kick a game-winning field goal. This would be his 4th field goal attempt. Thinking about the math, he already made 3. He's a 70% field goal kicker. The math says he's not going to make the game winner. So the coach could have said, sorry, you're a 70% field goal kicker. We're going to just lose the game. Not going to put you out there. We know your success rate. You don't get a chance to go out there and show us what you can do right now in this moment. But no, he went out there and he made it. And he was 4 for 4 on the day. And that he was boosted on everybody's shoulders. He was the champ. He helped us win like I'm a Lion. He helped us win the game. And Matt Prater, in that moment, showed us that he can kick field goals. Showed us what he can do. And he was crowned the MVP of the game. How often do we allow students to do the same thing? To show those redemptive qualities and say, show me what you can do right now in this moment. And that moment is the one that matters. It doesn't matter that he missed a field goal in week 1 or week 2 or week 3. He was given the opportunity right then and there to show us what he could do, and he did it. We have to have that same expectation for students. Show me what you can do right now in this moment. And what you can do right now matters more than what you could do back in September or October. This is the moment that matters.
Absolutely. Are you measuring who the student has become in this moment, or are you measuring who they were 3 months ago?
Right.
That's a really great question for every teacher to ask themselves right now.
Right.
Are you measuring who they are becoming based on your guidance, your instruction, your teaching, your educational environment, or are you measuring who they were? And I think that alone is a deep enough conversation, right? Because that kind of begs the question. If a student can't add double-digit numbers or do long division in quarter 1 or week 1, but they can do it in week 3, shouldn't their grade reflect that they can now do that?
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same principle, right?
Absolutely. I'm in my 21st year in education, and I hope to God that if I'm evaluated for some reason this year, that nobody takes who I was my first year of education and compared to where I am right now and says, let's just smack down. Let's figure out where the mean is. Let's figure out where the middle ground is. And let's just say that's where Schmitto is today. Using the mean is mean, people. Just stop it, period.
The mean is mean. I'm writing that one down. Oh, that's funny. The mean is mean. It's the same idea of like teaching to the middle to me.
Mm-hmm. That's
right?
it.
Like we're going to arbitrarily teach to where we think most of our students are. And in doing so, which is what the opposite of what a lot of what me and you and the Teach Better team talk about with educators all the time, right? Because if you teach to the edges of the spectrum and you're growing your highest students and your lowest students, your middle students are going to organically, naturally fall into place. It's only when we ignore the edges of that spectrum that we cease to see growth. Or maybe we only focus on the bottom 5% or whatever that a lot of schools tend to do. So absolutely, man. We could just keep going forever, but I do want to be respectful of your time. Any last takeaways that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would just throw again, look at the website that's scrolling along the bottom. If you're at all interested in this, just go there. And there's a little spot when you go to teachbetter.com/mastermind where you can register. Registering does not put you in any kind of raffle. It doesn't bind you for life. All it does is gives you access to that on Tuesday morning. You get an email from me with the Zoom link for the day. I mean, that's literally what you're registering for, to get the Zoom link to join us. That's it. And then you show up. We're not going to put a big spotlight on you if it's your first time and say, hey, stand up in front of the room. Tell us your deepest, darkest secret. We're going to make you cry. We're not going to make you do what my teachers used to do to me. I grew up and I went to 16 different schools growing up. And I hated that first day of school when the teacher would ask me to stand up and introduce myself to the class. Hated it. There's no new kid wants the spotlight on you're the new kid. So we don't put the spotlight on the new kids. We let you find your way. But what we find every single week is it's typically the new kids that start asking the questions. They're there for a reason. They've got a need and they just want some support. And the group rallies around them and says, we got you. So if you've got anything you're struggling with, come join us. If you've been here before, bring somebody with you. This group is absolutely incredible. And we will split up into 15 breakout rooms if we need to. We've got 9 a.m., 7 p.m. Pick the time, pick them both. This week, yesterday, we had 3 people that came to both meetings just because they were so inspired and they wanted to keep learning and growing and get different ideas. So pick your poison. Come to the time that works best for you.
I absolutely love the idea of new people coming in. And one of the things that resonates with me is I think when new people come in, they grow by learning or getting their problem solved, right? They come in, they go, I have a problem. I'm finally going to kind of leap in and see if I can get some help. But then the next week or the following weeks, they start to grow by giving, by providing answers. And I love that about this group is 1 week you might be getting help, but another week you might be helping someone else, right? And it's like this huge give and take where there's no central expert in the room. It's not a seminar. It's not a lecture. It's literally what it says to be a mastermind. It's a group of people with experience, knowledge, and expertise who are coming together for a common goal to help one another. And it's it's so great for me to see some of the people that came in just floundering and struggling and they needed help are now some of the leaders in helping others. And that's so amazing to me to be able to be able to do that. So yeah. Dave, I want to thank you as always for your time this morning. I absolutely love these conversations, but before we start on another 45-minute discussion about grading or assessment, I'm going to cut it off right here.
Fair enough, man.
So sign up, register for this amazing experience at teachbetter.com/mastermind. Mr. Schmidau, thank you as always. Everyone, have a fantastic day.